The backstory of the film is about Princess Muanna. Seduced by stories about the beauty of the sublunary world, she fled from the magical land, lost her way back, and died. However, her father, the king, has opened many hidden doors around the world and is waiting for his newly born daughter to remember her family and return home. 1944. Franco's power was established throughout Spain. However, scattered groups of guerrillas continue to fight the dictatorship. To eliminate them, the government creates special punitive squads. Captain Vidal is the head of one of them. He and his people settled in an old mill in the provincial outback. Vidal is cruel, efficient, and merciless to everyone except his own soldiers and people from secular society, whose interests he protects. Its main goal is to search and destroy partisan groups in the mountains. At Vidal's request, his pregnant wife Carmen comes to him, and with her daughter from her first marriage, Ophelia. Ophelia's own father died in the war. Captain Vidal adopted the girl, but did not try to love her. He only wants a son, and for this, he is ready to tolerate someone else's child next to him. On the day of his arrival at Vidal's camp, Ophelia meets his housekeeper Mercedes and finds the ruins of a stone labyrinth not far from the mill. At night, a fairy flies to Ophelia and takes her to the center of the labyrinth. There, the girl meets a faun, an ancient magical creature. The faun informs Ophelia that she is in fact Princess Muanna from a magical land, and that this is her second and last birth in the sublunary world. Before the full moon, she can return to her father the king, but to do this she must pass 3 tests. As a farewell, the faun gives Ophelia a magic book that should guide her. The first test is to save a withered fig tree from a giant toad that has taken up residence in its roots. To do this, Ophelia must feed 3 magic stones to the toad. The next day, a meeting of important guests is planned at the mill. While society is celebrating, Ophelia secretly escapes from the house into the forest. The magic book shows her the way to the fig tree. Having made her way through a crack in the trunk, Ophelia crawls along a dirty tunnel to the very roots, where she encounters a huge toad. Taking one of the woodlace, the girl offers it to the toad. She licks the woodlace from her palm with her tongue, and with it 3 pebbles. After this, the toad turns inside out and spews out a slimy mass, in which Ophelia finds the key. At the height of the holiday, Ophelia returns to the mill covered in dirt. Carmen gives the girl a bath, says that the girl has disappointed her and the captain, and deprives her of dinner. Left alone, Ophelia opens the magic book, and a picture with the text of the second task appears on the pages. The second test is to penetrate the dungeon located between the worlds and open the hiding place with the key. Suddenly, a mother's scream is heard from the next room. The pages of the book fill with blood. Carmen begins to bleed heavily. Vidal demands to call the doctor. The good-natured Dr. Ferrero, whose duties include monitoring the captain's wife, stops the bleeding and gives Carmen a sedative. Ophelia, on the advice of the doctor, is removed from her mother to another bedroom. The next morning, Captain Vidal and his squad are pursuing the partisans. In the forest at their resting place, he finds an ampoule with an antibiotic and realizes that the rebels are being helped by the locals. Upon returning to the old mill, Vidal confiscates all food and medicine, locking them in a warehouse. Mercedes gives the captain the key to the padlock, but keeps one duplicate for herself. At night, she takes the doctor to the partisan camp. It turns out that the head of the partisans is Mercedes' brother, and she has been helping them all this time, spying on Vidal and his subordinates. At night, a faun arrives, dissatisfied that the princess has not started her second task. Having learned about her mother's illness, the faun gives Ophelia mandrake root. The magic plant just needs to be placed in a saucer with milk, placed under the woman's bed and fed daily with 2 drops of blood. Carmen will recover, and Ophelia will not be distracted from completing her tasks. Before leaving, the faun gives her magic chalk that can open hidden doors and warns that the creature she will encounter is not human. There will be a lot of food and fruits in the dungeon, but you cannot touch them, much less eat them. 3 fairies, whom the faun carries with him in a closed tube, will help her complete the task. Having drawn a door with chalk on the wall, Ophelia makes her way into the dungeon. At the end of the corridor, she sees a large hall with a long table, at the head of which sits a blind creature, the Pale Man. His eyes are on the saucer. The fairies find 3 doors in the wall. Ophelia chooses the leftmost hiding place, despite the fact that the fairies point to another, and takes out a golden dagger from there. Before leaving, Ophelia succumbs to temptation and eats several grapes, ignoring the fairies' warnings. The Pale Man instantly comes to life, inserts his eyes into the slits in his palms, and begins to look for the girl. The fairies manage to warn Ophelia about the danger and distract the monster while she runs away, resulting in 2 of them being eaten by this monster. The Pale Man pursues her, but the girl manages to escape, closing the door in front of the monster's very nose. The faun, having learned about the tragedy, flies into a rage. The obtained dagger does not interest him. Mission failed. Now, Ophelia will never return home. Having threatened her with a hard life and inevitable death far from her native kingdom, he leaves. In the morning, the partisans derail the train. Arriving at the place with the detachment, Vidal learns that all the goods are intact. It was a distraction. In their absence, the partisans attack the old mill and rob the warehouse. Returning to his position, Vidal discovers that some of his people have been killed. The warehouse has been opened and everything has been stolen from it. However, the lock on the door was not broken. It was opened with a key. Having overtaken a group of partisans in the forest, Vidal and his men deal with all but one. He is taken to the barn and tortured for a long time, after which Dr. Ferrero is called. Vidal demands that the prisoner be brought to his senses so that he can resume the interrogation. In the absence of the captain, at the request of the dying man, Ferrero gives the prisoner a lethal injection. Returning to the barn and finding the dead prisoner, Vidal asks the doctor why he did not obey, because by doing so he signed his own death warrant. Doctor Ferrero replies that people like Vidal himself carry out orders, after which he leaves and calmly accepts his own death. The captain kills him with a shot in the back. Later, Vidal discovers Ophelia under the bed at the moment when she is feeding the mandrake root. The girl's children's games irritate him. The mother scolds her daughter, reproaching her for not seeing the real world, that life is cruel and it's time to forget about fairy tales. In desperation, Carmen throws the mandrake into the fireplace. After the root dies, she goes into premature labor and soon dies. The captain receives a newborn son as he wanted and buries his wife without much regret. After the funeral, Ophelia is prepared to leave and locked in her room for the night. Having summoned Mercedes, the captain offers her a drink, but the woman refuses. Then he sends her to the warehouse for a new bottle. Mercedes leaves without asking for the key. From that moment on, Vidal understands whose side she is on and who opened the castle for the partisans. Soon Mercedes takes letters from the cache to take them to the partisans and goes into the forest, where the captain and his subordinates overtake her. Mercedes is brought to the barn and prepared for torture. Only Vidal is left alone with her. Mercedes cuts the ropes with a knife hidden in the fold of her apron and wounds the captain, but she does not manage to escape far. The chase overtakes the woman in a clearing. Only the reinforcements of the partisans, led by her brother, arrived in time and saved her from death. All this time, Ophelia sits in the room alone. Suddenly, a faun appears and gives her one last chance for salvation. The third test, she must steal her newborn brother from the captain and bring him to the center of the labyrinth. There will be a full moon at night, and this is her last chance to return home. Ophelia escapes the room using magic chalk. She adds a sedative to Vidal's drink and tries to take the baby away unnoticed, but a sudden attack on the mill by partisans attracts the captain's attention. Turning around at the sound of an explosion, he notices Ophelia and the child and pursues her to the labyrinth. The walls part before the girl, allowing her to freely reach the center while Vidal tries to find her among the stone corridors. In the center of the labyrinth, a faun with a dagger in his hand is waiting for Ophelia. Now all that remains is to shed a drop of the blood of an innocent baby to open the gates to a magical land. Ophelia refuses to give him her brother, even if this will lead to her death in the sublunary world. Soon Vidal appears. He sees that the girl is talking to someone invisible, holding his son in her arms. Having taken the child away, the captain shoots Ophelia in the stomach, and leaves. At the exit from the labyrinth, Vidal is surrounded by partisans. The captain hands Mercedes the baby, takes out his father's watch, and asks him to tell his son the time of his death in the future. Mercedes cruelly rejects the tyrant's last request, answering that the boy doesn't even recognize his name. The astonished Vidal receives a bullet in the face and falls dead. In the center of the labyrinth, Mercedes and the partisans find the mortally wounded Ophelia. Bent over the girl, Mercedes hums a lullaby to her. Suddenly, Ophelia hears the voice of her real father, the king of the magical world, and finds herself in a luxurious throne room. The miracles she saw and the fairy tales she believed in turned out to be true. She is truly Princess Muanna, the ruler of a fairyland. Her father tells her that she is free from the shackles of her earthly body and can rightfully take her place on the throne next to him and the queen. A faun nearby with 3 living fairies confirms that the final test was whether Ophelia could overcome the temptation to sacrifice someone else's life to please herself. Thus, having passed the third test, she saved herself and began to rule the magical land with her parents. Dying in the arms of Mercedes, Ophelia smiles for the last time and becomes immortal in the underground kingdom. The last scene talks about the prosperous fate of Princess Muanna and the traces of her stay in our world, such as a blossoming flower on a dry fig tree branch. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe.